어쩌면 인생에서 가장 인상 깊게 읽은 논픽션 책이라고 할 수 있는데요. 이게 실화라고? 1848년 미국 남부 조지아. 노예 상태로 살아가던 한 부부가 자유를 찾아서 탈출을 시도합니다. 근데 그 탈출 방식이 너무 대담해요. 피부색이 밝았던 아내 앨런 크래프트는 백인 남성으로 위장을 하고 남편 윌리엄 크래프트는 그 곁에서 노예 하인 역할을 맡습니다. 한 인간이 자유를 찾아 나선다는 게 무슨 의미인지 끝까지 보여주는 책입니다.
Before reading this book, I mostly knew about the hard labor and punishment enslaved people endured. But I think I didn't fully realize about the emotional pain. The family could be separated at any moment and they could be sold like a property at auctions. It's hard to imagine how painful they must have been.
Yes, I think that's again where the craft story, their bravery in telling their story and telling us about what that felt like. It speaks across the ages, it speaks through the page, and it speaks to your heart right now. I can feel it.
네, 오늘은 2024년 한국인 최초 퓰리처상 수상작을 가져왔습니다. 오늘 제가 소개해드릴 책은 제목부터 굉장히 낯설고 강렬해요. 바로 주인 노예, 남편 아내. 이 낯선 네 단어들이 왜 한 줄에 이렇게 붙어 있을까요? 이 책을 끝까지 읽고 나면 와, 이것보다 더 잘 지은 제목은 없을 것 같다 이런 생각이 들더라고요. 이 두꺼운 책의 모든 핵심을 담은 단어들이거든요. 그리고 이 단어들 사이에서 느껴지는 긴장감을 온전히 담아낸 책이고요. 그리고 이 책의 첫 줄거리를 듣는 순간 많은 분들이 깜짝 놀라실 거예요. 이게 실화라고? 1848년 미국 남부 조지아. 노예 상태로 살아가던 한 부부가 자유를 찾아서 탈출을 시도합니다. 근데 그 탈출 방식이 너무 대담해요. 피부색이 밝았던 아내 앨런 크래프트는 백인 남성으로 위장을 하고 남편 윌리엄 크래프트는 그 곁에서 노예 하인 역할을 맡습니다. 그러니까 사랑하는 부부가 함께 살아남기 위해서 세상 앞에서는 주인과 노예인 연기를 해야 했던 거예요. 저는 이미 이 설정만으로도 한편의 대단한 소설 같다고 느꼈는데 더 놀라운 건 이게 철저히 실화에 기반한 논픽션이라는 점입니다. 근데 이 책이 진짜 대단한 이유는요. 이게 단순히 탈출 이야기여서가 아니에요. 이 책은 어떻게 탈출했는가를 넘어서 당시 미국 사회가 인간을 어떻게 구분짓고 어떻게 바라봤는가, 그리고 한 인간이 자유를 얻기 위해서 무엇을 감수해야 하는가, 이걸 아주 생생하게 보여주는 책이에요. 사실 저는 어렸을 때부터 미국의 흑인 노예 제도에 대해서 관심이 많았거든요. 그래서 생각해보면 초등학교 때 로자 파크스라는 흑인 민권 운동가가 그 버스 보이콧한 그 위인전도 읽었었고, 중학생 때는 마틴 루터 킹의 I have a dream 그 연설을 외우기도 했어요. 그리고 또 벌거벗은 세계사라는 프로그램을 진행하면서 그 당시 노예 무역선의 구조를 본 적이 있었거든요. 그 아프리카 흑인 노예들이 어떻게 정말 마치 짐승처럼 그 선박에 실려서 빽빽하게 이렇게 사람을 쇠사슬에 묶어놔요. 근데 그 선박의 어떤 설계도를 보고 정말 이거는 인간이 할 짓이 아니다. 어떻게 이런 끔찍한 역사가 있었을까 궁금해졌던 기억이 나요. 근데 이 책 주인 노예 남편 아내에서도 그럼 미국 흑인 노예제의 굉장히 잔인한 속성을 적나라하게 드러내고 있습니다. 근데 이 책은 우리가 미디어에서 많이 접한 것처럼 육체적인 노동, 육체적인 학대를 많이 다루진 않았어요. 대신 노예제라는 이 사회적인 시스템이 한 사람의 정신을 어떻게 철저히 파괴시킬 수 있는지 그 잔인함을 고발합니다. 예를 들면 흑인 노예가 아이를 낳아요. 그러면 그 자녀는 주인에게 마치 소유물처럼 귀속이 되거든요. 그래서 경매장에 나가서 얼마든지 물건처럼 사고 팔릴 수 있는 거예요. 그러면 이 부모와 자식이 정말 한순간에 생리별을 하는 거죠. 근데 이 책에도 나오지만 심지어 윌리엄 크래프트는 경매장에서 자신의 여동생과 인사를 할 시간조차 주어지지 않아요. 주인한테 빌거든요. 나 제발 여동생에게 마지막 작별 인사만 하고 오게 해달라. 어차피 평생 못 보게 될 테니까. 그때는 뭐 핸드폰이 있었던 시절도 아니고요. 근데 주인이 안 된다고 해요. 지금 시간 없다고 가야 된다고. 근데 윌리엄 크래프트가 여동생과 경매장에서 헤어지던, 인사도 못하고 헤어지던 그 순간이 목숨을 건 탈출을 결심하게 된 계기였어요. 아, 이렇게는 못 산다. 죽어도 이렇게는 못 산다. 난 차라리 죽는 게 낫지. 이렇게 짐승 같은 삶을 나는 살 수가 없다. 그때가 정말 어떤 모멘텀이었던 거예요. 책은 앨런과 윌리엄 크래프트 부부의 탈출 여정을 따라갑니다. 두 사람은 조지아 메이컨에서 출발해서 기차와 증기선 그리고 여러 도시를 거쳐서 북부 필라델피아까지 향해요. 근데 지금 이렇게 말씀드리면 단 몇 줄이지만 당시에는 그 여정의 매 순간이 발각과 체포 그리고 살해의 위험으로 가득했죠. 더구나 이 부부는 숨어서 도망친 게 아니었어요. 오히려 사람들 한가운데로 들어갑니다. 기차를 타고 배를 타고 호텔에서 묵고 다른 사람들과 얼굴을 마주 보면서 이동을 해요. 들키면 바로 끝인데도 세상의 시선 속으로 걸어 들어가는 방식으로 탈출합니다. 그래서 이 책은 굉장히 묘하게도 숨는 이야기가 아니라 어떻게 보여져야 사람으로 대우받고 살아남을 수 있는가에 대한 이야기이기도 해요. 앨런은 단순히 백인처럼 보이는 것만으로는 부족했습니다. 여성 혼자 남성 노예를 데리고 여행을 한다는 건 좀 의심스러울 수 있기 때문에 아예 백인 여성이 아니라 백인 남성으로 위장을 하죠. 그러니까 앨런은 흑인으로서 당시 인종차별뿐만 아니라 성차별에도 맞서야 했던 거였어요. 근데 또 문제가 있습니다. 숙박이나 이동 과정에서 서명을 요구받을 수 있는데 앨런은 노예였기 때문에 교육을 받지 못했거든요. 그래서 글을 쓸 줄 몰랐어요. 그래서 오른손을 다친 사람처럼 붕대를 감고 또 장애가 있는 상류층 백인 남성처럼 행동하면서 직접적으로 서명을 해야 되는 걸 피하고 또 이 여성으로서의 목소리가 너무 티나면 안 되니까 말을 아끼는 방식으로 위기를 넘깁니다. 저는 이런 부분들이 정말 놀라웠어요. 이게 단순한 변장이 아니라 당시 사회의 편견을 치밀하게 분석하고 역이용한 전략이었거든요. 사람들은 백인이면 주인일 거라고 생각했고 남성은 자유롭게 이동할 수 있는 존재라고 생각했고 또 상류층 남성이 과묵한 건 이상하게 여기지 않았습니다. 앨런과 윌리엄은 바로 그 편견의 틈을 파고들어요. 그래서 이 책을 읽다 보면 이런 생각이 들더라고요. 사람들은 정말 사람 그 자체를 보는 걸까? 아니면 인종, 성별, 옷차림, 계급 이런 겉모습만 보고 있는 걸까? 그리고 이 책이 좋았던 또 하나의 이유는 이 이야기가 목숨을 건 사랑 이야기라는 점이에요. 당시 노예제는 단순히 노동을 착취하는 시스템이 아니라 가족관계 전체를 무너뜨리는 제도였습니다. 흑인 노예가 아이를 낳으면요, 그 아이는 주인의 소유물이 됐거든요. 그래서 경매장에서 마치 물건처럼 사고 팔렸어요. 내 딸, 내 아들, 그리고 내 언니, 오빠, 동생 언제 다른 사람에게 팔려서 영영 얼굴을 못 보게 될지 모르는 거예요. 사랑하는 가족과 함께 살아간다는 가장 기본적인 권리조차 허락되지 않는 세계였던 거죠. 앨런과 윌리엄은 그런 현실을 너무나 잘 알고 있었기 때문에 노예 상태에서는 아이를 낳지 않겠다고 결심합니다. 이런 장면을 보면 크래프트 부부가 단지 본인들을 위해 도망을 친 게 아니라 그들이 앞으로 가지게 될 아이의 인간적인 삶을 위해서 그 아이의 곁에 있어주는 부모가 되기 위해서 목숨을 건 탈출을 감행했다는 걸 알 수 있죠. 그리고 무엇보다 중요한 건 이들의 탈출이 혼자만의 탈출이 아니었다는 거예요. 함께 인간으로 살기 위해 떠난 탈출이었습니다. 이 책은 처음부터 끝까지 그 둘의 협력과 신뢰 위에서 움직입니다. 앨런 혼자서는 완성되지 않고 윌리엄 혼자서도 완성되지 않아요. 두 사람은 서로를 믿고 세상이 강요한 가짜 신분을 연기합니다. 그리고 우리는 보통 미국 남부는 노예제, 북부는 자유주 이렇게 단순하게 생각하잖아요. 그래서 북부 쪽으로 도망가는 데 성공하면 모든 게 해결될 것 같았거든요. 하지만 이 책은 그 이후를 보여줍니다. 앨런과 윌리엄은 북부 쪽에서 잠깐 자유를 맛봤지만 그 자유는 완전하지 않았습니다. 도망친 노예들을 소위 노예 사냥꾼들이 끝까지 추격해서 다시 잡아갈 수 있었거든요. 그런 법과 제도 때문에 그들은 북부에서도 안전하지 않았어요. 근데 놀라운 건 크래프트 부부는 그냥 조용히 숨어 지내지 않았어요. 크래프트 부부는 쉴 틈 없이 공개 대중 강연을 다니면서 노예제 반대에 대한 목소리를 높이고 심지어 신문에 그들이 어떻게 탈출에 성공할 수 있었는지 거기에 대한 기사를 내기까지 해요. 그냥 조용히 숨지기고 살아도 위험할 판에 그들은 그들의 목소리를 내고 그들의 신분과 또 거처를 노출시킨 거였죠. 결국 크래프트 부부의 주인 그리고 그 주인에게 돈을 받은 노예 사냥꾼들이 이 크래프트 부부의 거처를 찾아서 쫓아오게 되죠. 그러니까 이 책은 어느 날의 어떤 극적인 도주만을 그린 책이 아니라 탈출 이후의 삶까지 추적하면서 한 인간이 자유를 찾아 나선다는 게 무슨 의미인지 끝까지 보여주는 책입니다. 그리고 그냥 단순히 앨런과 윌리엄 부부의 인생 스토리만 따라가는 게 아니라 그 당시 미국 사회 전체적인 분위기, 그리고 노예제 경제 시스템이 어떻게 작동을 했는지, 또 남부의 노예제와 북부의 노예제 폐지 운동이 국가적으로 어떤 충돌을 가져왔는지를 함께 보여줍니다. 그래서 읽다 보면 한 부부의 정말 위험한 모험담을 읽고 있는데 동시에 19세기 그 미국의 어떤 구조적인 모순이랄까요? 그런 거를 함께 볼 수 있습니다. 그냥 감동적인 실화에서 끝나지 않고 훨씬 더 지적인 만족감이 큰 책이 되는 것 같아요. 제가 이런 책이나 영화를 진짜 좋아하거든요. 다 읽고 나면 머릿속에 어떤 질문들이 많이 남는 책. 그래서 저는 이 책을 그냥 줄거리만 듣고 끝내긴 너무 아까운 책이라고 생각을 해요. 요약본을 이렇게 듣는 걸로는 이 책의 진짜 매력을 다 느낄 수 없거든요. 여러분들이 직접 읽으시면서 그 앨런과 윌리엄이 한순간의 실수로 둘 중 한 명이 언제라도 죽임을 당할 수 있다는 그 사실에 얼마나 긴장을 하면서 도망을 갔을지, 기차 안에서, 배 안에서, 그리고 낯선 사람들 사이에서 핸드폰도 없었던 시절에 어떻게 소통을 했을지 그 디테일을 느껴보셨으면 좋겠습니다. 지금 우리에게 마치 공기처럼 당연하게 느껴지는 자유는 원래 누구에게나 주어지는 게 아니었다는 그런 역사적 사실. 그리고 어떤 사람들은 그걸 얻기 위해서 자기 전부를 걸어야 했다는 사실. 그리고 이 부부는 그 싸움을 혼자가 아니라 끝까지 함께 해냈다는 사실. 그래서 저는 이 책 주인 노예 남편 아내를 단순히 역사 논픽션이라기보다는 서스펜스처럼 긴장감, 스릴감도 있고 차별에 맞선 사랑 이야기도 있고 또 자유와 존엄을 찾아가는 그런 주제가 한 권에 다 들어가 있는 책이라고 느꼈습니다. 그래서 제가 어쩌면 인생에서 가장 인상 깊게 읽은 논픽션 책이라고 할 수 있는데요. 이 책의 저자분, 퓰리처상을 수상하신 우일현 작가님을 모시고 인터뷰를 진행을 해봤습니다. 제가 이 책을 읽으면서 너무너무 궁금한 게 많이 생기는 거예요. 이 책의 저자분의 목소리를 직접 듣고 그 숨겨진 상징적인 의미라든지 이 책을 처음 쓰셨을 때 어떤 마음으로 책을 쓰시게 되셨는지 그 뒷이야기를 좀 생생하게 듣고 싶었어요. 그러면 우일현 작가님과의 인터뷰를 만나볼게요.
Oh, hi, Dr. Wu.
Good morning or good night. It's good to see you. And you can call me Ilyan.
Thank you, Ilian. So let me briefly introduce myself. I'm Hae-sung, and I work as a TV presenter in Korea.
Wonderful. Yeah, I've heard great things about your show.
Thank you, and welcome to the 1% Book Club channel. So before we dive into the interview, what was the most surprising reaction you've ever received from readers so far?
I would say probably the most important and the most moving and really the dearest reaction I've ever gotten was from the Craft's own family, and especially their great-great-granddaughter, who has become a dear friend. Her first reading of it, she read the book before it was published, was something I'll never forget. And actually, when I won the Pulitzer Prize, when I found out that I won that prize, it was a big shock. I couldn't feel my body. I didn't know sort of where I was.
So you never expected?
No, not at all. I can tell you about that later too. But the first person I called was not my parents, but it was actually my friend Peggy Trotterdam Priestley, the Craft's great-great-granddaughter.
Wow.
My husband was already in the house, so he knew. But the first person I acted was her.
I think you gave them a gift, a family gift.
I mean, to be honest, the gift has really been for me from them, their connection to the story, not just to me, actually, they preserve the story. It's because not only the Crafts told their story and passed it down, but because the descendants also cared for it and shared it by being so open that scholars like me, that we can follow that trail. So that's really, I think, where the gift comes from.
They must have been very proud about the Crafts.
Yes, and rightfully so.
Thanks for sharing their reaction. And let's start with the title, which is Master, Slave, Husband, Wife. Just 4 words with no explanation. This title was so striking because I've been even more curious about the story. So did you have this title from the beginning?
I did have it from the beginning. It is one of those things just kind of fell in place. And, for me, the writing and the experience of the story has been very much something in my ear, something very much heard. And that goes for the title as well. I almost sort of heard it and felt it before I knew it. I felt it as a rhythm. And there's definitely rhythm to it. It's a master, slave, husband, wife, right? It's a bum, 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 bum. And there was a force to that, and a strength to that, and a clarity to that, that sort of moved me forward. And I felt like what those words did for me is create sort of the blocks that then they knock down. And the way the title grew as I wrote the story is that I found almost like a musical refrain. These words coming back throughout the book. And the combination of these terms reorganizing themselves until the very end. And in fact, the story ends when these words no longer mean what they did in the beginning. And the knockdown is complete.
Actually, one of my favorite sentences in this book was just what you said. In page 315, William and Ellen and William broke free of all encumbrances as they walked as global citizens. Master, slave, husband, wife, no more. Such a wonderful sentence.
Thank you for reading and seeing that. That is the moment where it landed for me. Although I will say there is one sort of sneaky final reference to those terms when they no longer exist, when Ellen Craft has the power. And maybe you can find that later.
So in the book, it seems like Ellen and William are trying to free themselves not only from slavery, but also from the traditional roles of husband and wife. That was the reason why you chose this title, right?
They're running for themselves and for their freedom immediately, right, to escape slavery. And actually, the story could have ended there. We could have ended, much sooner. when they arrive in the North. That's sort of the traditional fugitive narrative. But what they were doing is so much more, in part because of their telling their story. So I think the power of telling one story is another really important theme. They don't go and disappear. They don't go to Canada and change their names and hide and live quiet lives on their own. They are up there, out there, on a stage, telling their whole story, first to the whole country and then to the whole world, at a time when it's extremely dangerous to do so. And in doing so, they set a model not only for their times, but I think for ours as well.
So this book is about two enslaved people who bravely freed themselves. So I read that you went to a school named after Martin Luther King Jr. So did your interest in the history of slavery start around that time? What first sparked your interest?
I would say most definitely. This is the Martin Luther King Jr. School, and I was in a part of that school that was known as the King Open School. And immediately you could see in this classroom the differences between a traditional education and this sort of open experimental education. Instead of memorizing facts and dates, we were introduced to history through story, through speech, through music, and through pictures. It's a fullness of history that I appreciate to this day.
I've been very interested in the story of slavery since I was very young. Like when I was in the elementary school, I read about Rosa Parks and her bus boycott. And when I was in middle school, I memorized Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream.
That is amazing.
Yeah, that was one of the most memorable speeches I've ever heard. And I think it was because I just couldn't understand how human beings could treat other human beings that way. You also mentioned about concentration camps as well.
Yeah.
So those histories were the things that I could never forget.
You had a big mind and spirit as a child, and I'm so curious as to how you found the Martin Luther King speech and what possessed you as a child to learn those words by heart. I don't know if that's an expression that translates, but I actually had a poetry teacher in college who said, "Don't say memorize, say learn it by heart."
We should feel it.
Yes,
right?
You chose to learn the speech by heart as such a small person. So what made you do that? How did you find the words and what made you want to keep them in that way?
I think I was attracted by one sentence that he was dreaming of a nation that his kids are not judged by their skin color.
Yeah.
I was so touched by that belief and vision and dream. As parents, every parent would dream for that nation for their kids.
Where they're not judged by the color of their skin, but by the color of their character. I have a dream. And I know these words too, because in that classroom that you asked me about, every year, one grade, we memorized this speech and recited it from beginning to end. And each child got a line. So I still remember my line, "A great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand, signed Emancipation Proclamation."
So that was your sentence.
Yes, it was my sentence.
Oh, that's so lovely.
But I love the line that you quoted.
Thank you. Could you tell us about Running 1,000 Miles for Freedom, which inspired this book?
Yes, it's an amazing story. So I urge everyone to read that as well, the Craft's original word. This is a text that they wrote or they published in 1860. So this is 12 years after their escape. It's sort of different from the tradition. There are others like Frederick Douglass, William Wells Brown. I mean, you name the speaker, and they often write their narratives as they're on the road telling their story. And in some cases, they're writing with somebody But the Crafts waited. They waited for 12 years until they could tell the story themselves on the page. They were in a position where they were going to be able to write their own story. It has so many different colors to it. And one of the colors that really comes out in a surprising and shocking and irreverent and important way is humor and irony. It's not a color that you would expect in a narrative like this. And it is incredibly powerful, incredibly sharp. And to the slave powers, I think it is incredibly destructive. So it's a wonderful story told, and it is the starting point for anybody who is interested in telling or knowing the story about the Crafts.
And we can't really talk about this book without mentioning these words. You used the word enslaved instead of slave, and enslaver instead of master. So I'd love to hear why you made that choice.
Well, I can't take credit for that language because that's something that's now very much sort of steeped in scholarship. It's thankful. But I can tell you what I find to be its significance. To call somebody a slave, call them that object, and to rob them of their humanity. Whereas when you say enslaved, there's an action that is built into that word. So you're saying what has been done to them, and that they are both the receiver of an action and also active human beings themselves. And when you say enslaved person, you're identifying them as a person, and enslaved as the secondary thing, something that's been done to them, something that doesn't define them. Who they are is a person. They are a woman, they are a man, they are a child, they are whatever they are in themselves. And same goes with enslaver. Too long we say, a planter, a master, a mistress. The word master actually raises people up. When you call somebody a enslaver, you're putting the verb in them because they're choosing to do this. They're choosing to enslave. And that's what their power is in that verb and embracing and taking that action. So there the verb is built in to the noun.
And let's talk about Ellen's father. Ellen's father, James Smith, was both her enslaver and her father. So I kept thinking, what kind of relationship is that? It was unimaginable.
It is. One of the original historical documents that I found that made me decide to write this book. And I found this page with beautiful handwriting. It was Ellen's father's page where he is saying, let me back up for a second here. He has another daughter, an older daughter, Eliza Collins. And he says, for the love and goodwill I have for my daughter Eliza, I'm going to give her the following property. Under that, he names Ellen Craft, who is also his daughter. So if you just sit with that for a moment, right? It's shocking. On this page, this father is giving one child, another child, as property. And he's saying it's because he loves his child that he's giving her this property, which he identifies by name, Ellen, and age.
I really don't get it because...
It's mind-blowing.
Wow. I don't get the situation, but that was how it was at that time.
I think it speaks a lot to how we human beings can create different categories. Once you start seeing somebody not as a person, not as a child, not as a daughter, but you see them as a thing.
As a property.
Right. Or just as, sometimes in cases, even just different from yourself. If you can't acknowledge the humanity in another person, one can do all kinds of things. I think it's easy to say, oh, he was so terrible, but he's not the only one. I mean, this has happened. He is one of so many. There are variations of this kind of separation from humanity that we see playing out over and over again, not just in his time, not just in his body, not just in his place, but all over the world, then and now. This is part of what it means to be human.
Before reading this book, I mostly knew about the hard labor and punishment enslaved people endured. But I think I didn't fully realize about the emotional pain. Like, the family could be separated at any moment, and they could be sold like a property at auctions. So it's hard to imagine how painful they must have been.
Yes, I think that's again where the craft's story, their bravery in telling their story and telling us about what that felt like. It speaks across the ages, it speaks through the page, and it speaks to your heart right now. I can feel it. Going back to that narrative, Running 1,000 Miles for Freedom, that you asked me about the craft story. This is William's voice, but William tells the story of how when he's 16 years old, he is put on an auction block, and his sister first, right before the camera starts shooting, let's say, his sister has just been sold. So he's had to watch his younger sister be auctioned like the property that she was considered. He's not only had to watch her be sold, but he has to really have his wits about him because he needs to find out where she's gone. Probably he'll never be able to see her again. But in that moment, as a teenager, he's trying to get information. So even while he's on this block, he asks somebody, can you please go to my sister's new enslaver and see if he can stop for just a minute, just so I can say goodbye, and presumably so he can know where she's headed to. In the end, he's not able to say goodbye. And we know that because he tells us his story and how painful it must be to summon that memory for him. And he did it again and again and again and again in person, on a stage and on the page. He brought back that memory so that they could know it, the people in that time, and that so we can know it now. And isn't that amazing? The power of story to reach across time, to reach across space, and now to reach across language, for you to be able to feel that now.
Yeah, that's truly amazing. That's the power of a story. When the Crafts first escaped, they didn't use the Underground Railroad, which was a secret network. They literally used a railroad. So what does this railroad represent in this story?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I think it represents so very much. I can just maybe touch on one or two things. I'll begin by saying that, so we talked about how Ellen's sister, she was enslaved by her sister, right? Her sister's husband, he bought and sold all kinds of things, including stocks and cotton and railroad business. For now, we focus on the railroad. He was actually credited, celebrated for supervising and basically being the contractor for building this railroad. So this is his pride. Nobody thought that anybody could do this. And he and a partner are credited for being the masters of this railroad. And who should find her freedom on the same road that he claimed that he built, but that actually was built by enslaved people. People who built this railroad, and many people died for this construction, were enslaved people. And these are railroads that are bringing back and forth cotton, that are bringing back and forth people. It's a powerful thing. And she is harnessing this power. She's taking that power for herself, for freedom. So there is the power of the railroad itself, but when you know that history too, you just think that she took that back for herself and for her people. And it's high technology. So I can also tell you that next to the railroad tracks that are being constructed are telegraph wires. So that is really like the internet of now. It used to be before the telegraph, before the railroad, it could take you, days and weeks to get any kind of news, right? And the railroad cuts down that time for people to travel, but also the news to travel. Now you could have any sort of news or announcement just instantly pinged to a different part of the country or a different part of the world, which is really exciting, but also really dangerous because that news can travel so fast. By the time Ellen and William Craft moved from Macon to Charleston, let's say, if the enslavers have found out that something's happened, they can send word via telegraph that there are slave hunters who are waiting for them. So this technology, all of this technology together, the railroad, the telegraph, it's incredible power, but it's also incredible danger at the same time. which you might say the same for our own technology now.
That's quite similar to these days.
There's a lot of resonance.
History repeats itself.
Yes, it does.
And at that time, many enslaved people live in even harsher conditions than the crafts, and only few people managed to escape. So why do you think Ellen and William were able to succeed?
Well, they had this incredible strategy that they used, right? It's almost impossible, really, to cross boundaries at that time, especially from Georgia. I mean, you have to make it through many, many slave states to go here. Even as the railroads are going all over the country, there's like border patrol. They actually have groups of people going out to walk and make sure that no Black people are basically out on the streets in the dark. Anybody can be stopped at any time and asked to show papers. They're trapped. So how are they going to escape? You do have sometimes men, like single men, escaping by themselves closer to the border of the North. But a couple like this, it's really hard because she looks so white. If she got dressed and she sort of went into a white crowd, she could probably disappear. But William's not going to be able to join her. So it's strange that sort of every advantage that they have individually, you know, William being a young man, being able to sort of physically make that escape, better chances, it still would be, you know, almost impossible. Ellen being able to pass for white, when you put them together, they weigh each other down, right? They lose whatever sort of advantage that they've had. But what's incredible is that they use sort of the very containers, master, slave, husband, wives, the very categories that are supposed to imprison them, they turn them upside down. Ellen becomes a white man, and she knows that she can pass for white, that people will believe this because people have been mistaking her for white since she was a child. When she wears that disguise, she assumes the power of a white man. And William then being next to her actually adds to her power because when you see that she's with him, it's saying that she is rich enough and powerful enough to own this other human being. And when he plays the role of serving her, he is also raising her up. So then they have the ultimate power. They go from being at the very bottom of society to the very top. And then they can do anything.
So they were smart enough to use the weak point of this absurd system.
Yes.
And at that time, enslaved people were forbidden from getting an education. So even if they wanted to learn how to read or write, they simply couldn't. So it made me think, today we often see studying as something annoying or something we are forced to do. But when you think about the time when Ellen and William lived in, the ability to study or even read a book wasn't something you could take for granted. It was actually a privilege.
Yes, and it's also a privilege, it's a danger, and it's a power. Once you have literacy, you can gain information that can help you escape. All that information, people back then, they wrote it down. And if you look at the maps, they are really complicated because there's so many different places you can go. I personally have a terrible sense of direction. And so even with a map, it was hard for me to start, you know, where to go and where to make all those stops. If you don't have any of that, even if you know how to get on a train, how do you know where to go? How do you know where to travel? Controlling literacy was a means of an attempt to keep people from knowing. So if you want power, if you really want knowledge, then learn to read and learn to write and learn to tell your own story. Because actually people in power know how important that is. And those who want power for themselves, that's the first thing they're going to try to take away. William and Ellen Craft knew that. They knew. And as soon as she gets to a place where she can escape, actually, there's a very famous writer in that period who says, she makes note of the fact that the crafts, their roles in slavery were not in the fields, were not sort of the most physically difficult conditions. The crafts themselves say again and again, what we experienced was not the worst, right? So the author says, if it was not the worst, if it was not so bad, then why did you try to escape? And the first reason Ellen Craft gives is because I wanted to learn, because I wanted to learn to read and write, and they would not let me have an education. It was one of the main reasons why she wanted to run.
The passion for learning.
Yes.
When you learn how to read and write, you start seeing things in a critical way. You start critical thinking, so you can fight against slavery system.
Yes, they quote in the beginning of their narrative lines from two very important documents. So this is actually a copy of Running for Freedom. You can see I've sort of heavily marked up my own copy. I can read you from the first line of their preface where they say, and this is a quotation from the Bible, God made of one blood all nations of men, and also that the American Declaration of Independence says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They were not allowed to read these words, right? But they heard these words. So they cannot read these words. They feel the power of those words. Words are a form of currency, and you can own them by hearing them or by reading them. When you can read, when you can learn, when you can really listen, no matter where you are, no matter who you are, you can connect into this.
So after risking their lives to escape, they could have just lived quietly and tried to stay safe. But instead, Ellen and Craft spoke publicly against slavery, giving lectures and even appearing in newspapers. Their identities were exposed. So I kept wondering, what could be more courageous than that? They were so heroic.
They were heroic because they were pursuing their own life, liberty, and happiness. But in taking this huge additional risk, they were fighting for all those others still in bondage, and including the loved ones that they left behind. So it's a journey about love that they have for each other and for the children that they want to have together, but really for all their people. Can you imagine also how hard it must have been for them to leave those loved ones? Like Ellen leaving her mother. They had family still in bondage, and they knew they were almost certainly never going to see them again. So it's also, in a way, kind of a love song, because this is where it gets kind of sneaky and interesting too. When they are telling their story everywhere, and they know that story could travel down by train, by word, by telegraph, back down to the people who enslaved them. And that does happen. There's a danger. But that story is also reaching the people who they love, and they're able to say through that we are safe and we are fighting for you.
And later, those people fought for the crafts. That was so touching.
A lot of people stood for the craft. So when the crafts tell their story and they're reaching, people across the country, across the world, they are really mobilizing an army. And this is part of what leads up to the Civil War. Because as people are hearing these stories about what slavery was really like, because, of course, the people in the South are saying, you guys have no idea. It's actually much better to be enslaved. That it would be terrible if they were freed. They wouldn't know what to do with themselves, the slavers argue. And the enslavers argue that if slavery is ended, you're going to have all these people going up to where you live in the North. And they're going to cause trouble for you. They're going to take your jobs, it's going to be a whole mess. So the enslavers are saying it's better for everybody if we keep slavery as it is. And what the crafts are doing when they're telling their story is they're reporting on actually the horrors of what slavery was actually like. And they're saying, no, it's not what these people are saying it. So they're bearing witness to that. But they're also presenting themselves. Ellen is a dressmaker, a seamstress. William is a skilled cabinet maker. They are earning their own money, working as responsible members of society. They're showing that there's a whole population of people like them who have much to contribute, and that they're not a danger to the worlds that they enter. So they are communicating so much and to so many different people when they take this, as you say, extremely brave stance.
The craft's escape became much bigger than just personal story. It turned into a national issue where the beliefs of the South and North clashed. And the enslaver even appealed to the President of the United States. So whatever decision that the president would make, that will be recorded in history. So I wonder if he realized that at that moment.
I wonder too. I would imagine that if he really realized that, then maybe he would have acted differently. I don't know, but this is all speculation.
It's quite funny that our actions and words will be recorded in history someday. So we should mind ourselves.
That's true. I hope that that's how we conduct ourselves in society, like knowing that our words do have resonance. They're powerful.
There's a line in the book that says, good and evil have nothing to do with skin color. And that really struck me because it was quite different from what I expected in this story.
I think, again, going back to these categories of master slave, husband wife, black white, north south, that's another divide that we haven't really talked about. But you think, oh, the north is good, no slavery, the South is bad because they have slavery. The boundary is much more fluid than we think. And people are much more fluid. People are moving back and forth. And even with a single person, there's a variation. It's not like an individual person is purely good or purely bad. There's a variance within individuals as well. I think that's what the craft story powerfully teaches, to break down boundaries, across nations, within the nation, within a state, within a community, and even within individuals. I think it's much easier when you say, this person is bad and this person is good, to make a judgment and to not connect, right? At that point, you distance yourself. You say, this is a person who's done bad things, and how could they do that? I would never do that. The challenge is to see the humanity in that person and to know that you share that humanity and you share those variabilities. And we'd like to think, I would never do such things. But how can we ever know unless we're actually in that other person's shoes? That's where story can be very powerful, because we can try to imagine ourselves in another person's shoes, experiencing that other perspective. And maybe we can learn from seeing what options that person had and what choices they made. Maybe we can learn from imagining what we might choose, what we would want to choose. That's the way that we learn in our own lives, hopefully, not to make the same mistakes and not to let history repeat itself.
I really liked this line, and it gave me lessons not to simplify the history.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for writing such a wonderful book. Are you planning on the next book?
I'm writing the same story all over again. I'm writing the story of the crafts for younger readers. So this is children maybe around ages 11 to 16 is what I imagine, because 11 is when Ellen was given away as property as a wedding present and separated from her mother. 16 is when William was auctioned and sold away from his sister. So I kind of picture that range of ages also as the age of the readers. I feel like kids that age need to know this history. And as much as I've appreciated the fact that there are high schools that are assigning the adult book, kids don't want to read an adult book in the same way, right? Teenagers are a whole different people, and I think they respond to different forms of storytelling. So I'm changing my own form of storytelling and writing the story again from the very beginning for them.
Students might be very inspired by your story, just like I did by the Rosa Parks book.
That would be the dream. I would love for that to happen.
Yeah, thank you again for spreading this powerful story.
Thank you for receiving it with such heart.
Thank you for taking your time again. And I'm rooting for your abbreviated version of master, slave, husband, wife.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye for now.
Bye. It's great to be in
Bye.
conversation with you.
It was so great for me as well.
단어 속에 잠긴 세계 끝없는 여행이 시작돼 나는 책을 읽